anti-Semitic incidents have increased by nearly 10% over the last year. Most incidents have been verbal threats, harassment, and graffiti. That report comes from the Executive Council of Australian Jewry. They note several incidents as well of anti-Semitic physical violence. The report also notes the rise of far-right groups in Australia, particularly the relatively newly formed neo-Nazi hate group Anti-Podian Resistance. Joining me now to talk about this in studio is Avi Yemeni. Avi is a prominent Australian Jewish activist. He's with the Australian Conservative Party. Sir, thanks for being with us. Talk about this group, the Anti-Podian Resistance. What kind of membership does it have? And perhaps more importantly, what kind of presence does it have on social media?
I think they're conflating issues here. I don't think they're just tiny minority.
Sure.
I think a lot of the rise in anti-Semitism actually comes from more the fact that we've had a high Islamic immigration, like you see in much of the world. I don't think that the rise has necessarily got anything to do with these far-right groups like they like to portray. Separate issues. That group specifically that you mentioned is tiny.
So apparently, you can empirically prove the rising incidence of anti-Semitism. It's tied to, in your view, purely Muslim immigration?
I think it's in big part, yes.
And what's being done, I guess, to combat that, to address this issue?
I think people don't really want to talk about it. So these days, people like myself and others that are standing up and saying, well, we need to be able to discuss these issues. It doesn't make you some sort of bigot or whatever it is if you dare call it's a spade a spade.
The Executive Council of Australian Jewry report notes that most of these incidents that they track comes from graffiti and signs and posters, that kind of thing. Are those coming from refugees? Those are not...
Look, I think those are coming from kids most of the time, and they're not necessarily the kind of hate crimes that really bother people. I think it's more when you see an incident where there's an operation in Israel and you see a Jew running around a park getting bashed.
Yeah, people tying Israeli policy just to Jews of Australia. Is there a sense of fear?
When things warm up here. So I think at the moment, because of the Trump decision, people were a little bit worried, and that was part of the reason why I came. So I think it does tie up into Israeli politics. It's just the way of the world. People say they don't have any problem with Jews. They're just anti-Zionist, but then they take it out on the Jews.